This is a footprint. It was pressed into wet mud on a tidal flat in what is now southern Poland. It is 395 million years old. You can still see the toes. Something walked here. Something with feet and legs and a body it could hold up against gravity. And according to everything we thought we knew, the animal that made this print should not have existed for another 18 million years. For 4 billion years, the continents of this planet were bare rock. No soil, no roots, no shade. Nothing had ever lived there, not once. Then, in a window of about 100 million years, that bare stone became forests, with trees 8 meters tall and root systems you would recognize in your own garden. Something crossed the waterline, and almost nothing about how it happened is what you were taught. This is before us, the history of the world before anyone was here to see it. The date is 470 million years ago. The oceans are full, the land is empty, and hold on to that footprint. We are going to come back to it, and when we do, it is going to take this story apart. Stand on that shore. The rock under your feet is bare. Not bare like a desert. Deserts have soil. Bare like the inside of a quarry. Fractured stone, gravel, coarse sand. Nothing holds it together, so when it rains, the whole surface moves. There is no shade anywhere on the planet. The sun arrives unfiltered, and there is nothing to eat. That is the part people tend to miss. The ocean is a soup. Food drifts into you whether you chase it or not. On land, the nutrients an organism needs are locked inside mineral grains. Phosphorus in particular sits in rock crystal, and rock crystal does not dissolve on request. So land was not an empty opportunity waiting to be taken. Land was a wall. Now, before I show you any evidence, I want something from you. When you picture the first life to make it onto land, you almost certainly picture a plant. Something small and green in a crack in the rock. Hold that picture and put it in the comments now. Plant or something else? I am asking because I think you are about to change your answer. The first evidence is almost invisible. In rocks from Argentina, from Oman, from the Czech Republic, dating to about 473 million years ago, there are spores. Microscopic, smaller than a grain of pollen. They matter for one reason. Their walls are made of sporopollenin, one of the toughest organic compounds biology has ever produced, and it exists for a single purpose. It stops a cell drying out in open air. A spore does not need that wall underwater. Some of them are fused in groups of 4, which is the signature of a particular kind of cell division. These were not algae drifting ashore. Something on land was reproducing, and that is all we have. No stems, no leaves, no bodies, just spores, for the next 45 million years. When bodies finally do appear in the late Silurian, they are unimpressive. Cooksonia is about as complicated as a plant gets at this point. A green stem, forking once or twice, with a small capsule of spores at each tip. No leaves, no flowers, a few centimeters tall, but by 407 million years ago, something has changed. In Scotland, at a place called Rhynie, a hot spring flooded a wetland with silica-rich water and buried an entire living landscape in glass. It is the most complete early land ecosystem we have. Plants preserved cell by cell, still standing exactly where they grew. None of them are taller than 40 centimeters, and they are everywhere. That low green mat changed the surface of the planet. Plants hold sediment in place, so the ground stops washing away every time it rains. They shed dead tissue, so for the first time there is organic matter lying on rock. Mix the two, and you get something that had never existed anywhere. Soil. Soil holds water, it holds nutrients, it holds heat, and a dead plant is food. For the first time in 4 billion years, there was something on land worth eating. So there it is, the first answer, and it is the one in every textbook. Plants went first. Plants made the land survivable. Everything else followed them out of the water. But there is a problem with that story. Those first plants had no roots. Not small roots, none. Cooksonia is a stem and a spore capsule. The plants at Rhynie anchor themselves with thin filaments barely more than hairs. Nothing on land could drill into rock and pull phosphorus out of it because nothing on land had the equipment. So look inside the Rhynie plants. Cut a section, put it under a microscope, and inside the cells, preserved in glass for 407 million years, there are fungi. Not attacking, living inside. Fine branching structures pressed against the cell wall, exchanging material across it. That is a mycorrhiza. It is the same arrangement running under your feet right now, in more than 8 out of 10 plant species alive today. The fungus mines minerals the plant cannot reach. The plant pays in sugar. There is an uncomfortable question buried in that, about who was actually in charge. Plants did not conquer the land. Plants were carried. So if a plant needed a partner just to stand on bare rock, what did an animal need? The animals arrive quickly and they arrive small. On a beach in Aberdeenshire, in a slab of sandstone, there is a fragment of a millipede about a centimeter long. Along its flanks is a row of narrow slits. Those slits are spiracles. They open into a network of fine tubes that carry air directly into the body tissue. That system has one property worth noticing. It only works in air. Fill it with water and the animal suffocates. This is not a creature testing the shoreline. This is a creature that had already committed. So kneel down at Rhynie and look at what it committed to. The tallest thing in this landscape comes up to your shin. There are no leaves anywhere, so there is no shade, and no sound of wind moving through anything. The ground under your hand is spongy, layers of dead stems that have not rotted away, because almost nothing here knows how to break them down yet. Turn one of them over. Underneath, things move. Mites the size of a full stop, springtails, a centipede going somewhere in a hurry. None of them are hunting the plants. They are eating what the plants leave behind. The first land animals were not conquerors any more than the plants had been. They were cleaning up in a food chain that ran entirely on rot. Then there are the vertebrates. In the rivers and deltas of the Devonian, there is a group of fish with an unusual anatomy. Their fins are not fans of thin rays. They are fleshy lobes with bone inside. One bone, then 2 bones. Then a cluster of smaller ones. Hold your arm out in front of you and you have just described it. Upper arm, forearm, wrist. Why would a fish need that? Because in shallow, weed-choked, oxygen-poor water, a fin you can push against the bottom with is worth more than a fin you can only beat. But that raises a much harder question, and almost nobody asks it. Why would a fish ever want to leave? Water gives you oxygen. It brings food to you. It carries your weight, so your skeleton does not have to. Land offers none of that. It is hot, dry, and almost empty. Nothing evolves toward a worse place because it feels like it. So something must have made the water worse than the land, and for a long time we were certain we knew what. The old story says these fish were trapped. Pools dried out in the dry season, and the ones that could drag themselves over the mud to the next pool survived. And so, gasping and struggling, life crawled onto the land. It is a wonderful story. Almost every museum diorama has told some version of it. And in 2004, on Ellesmere Island in the Canadian Arctic, a team found the animal that seemed to prove it. They had gone looking deliberately. They chose rocks of the right age from the right environment and spent 5 field seasons on a frozen plain. On the 4th expedition, a snout appeared in the cliff face. Tiktaalik, 375 million years old. Some individuals up to 2.5 meters long. There are scales and fins like a fish. But there are also ribs, and the shoulder is no longer bolted to the back of the skull, which means this animal has a neck. It can turn its head. Inside the front fin, there is a shoulder joint, an elbow, and a wrist. A fish that could do a push-up. Fish in shallow water. Fins strengthen into limbs. A neck appears. And 400 million years later, you are holding a phone with the far end of that same skeleton. That is the story. Plants made the land survivable. Arthropods moved in to feed on them. Then the water turned against the fish and the fish came out and learned to walk. It is clean. It is memorable. Almost everyone alive believes some version of it, and the central claim in it is wrong. In what is now eastern Greenland, in rock about 365 million years old, there is an animal called Acanthostega, about a meter long, 4 limbs. Each limb ends in fingers, which makes this animal, by definition, a tetrapod. One of us, count them, 8. 8 fingers on each hand. They are joined by webbing. There is no wrist. The elbow does not straighten forward, so the animal cannot get itself into a weight-bearing position. And it has internal gills, full working gills, the kind you keep only if you are still breathing water. Acanthostega had hands and could not walk. And that reverses the whole story. Limbs did not evolve so that animals could leave the water. Limbs evolved in the water, for use in the water, for pushing through dense weed, for holding position in a current, for crawling along a river bottom. The hand is older than the land. Nothing crawled out to get legs. Things that already had legs eventually ended up outside. And that quietly disposes of the drying pools. If the equipment was already built, nothing had to be trapped. The pools may well have dried out. They were just never the reason. So when did anything actually walk on land, and who? The answer is sitting in a working quarry in the Holy Cross Mountains in southern Poland. In 2002, a geologist noticed marks on a limestone slab there. It took 8 years to work out what they were. They are trackways, rows of paired impressions made by an animal moving on 4 limbs. In the best preserved prints, you can count individual toes. From the spacing between them, some of these animals were more than 2 meters long. The rock was dated using microfossils, about 395 million years ago. Sit with that number for a moment. That is 18 million years before the oldest tetrapod skeleton anyone has ever found, and 10 million years before Tiktaalik, before the fish that was supposed to be the transition even existed. The reaction was not universal agreement, and the objection was reasonable. Some of the prints are shallow blobs, and the rock looked like a shallow marine tidal flat, which would mean the marks might have been made by an animal swimming or wading, not walking. So the site was re-examined. A later analysis concluded the deposit was not marine at all. It was a succession of ephemeral lakes with a restricted non-marine biota, fresh water drying out repeatedly. In other words, exactly the setting where you would expect something to be walking across mud. And then, in May of last year, it happened again. A slab of sandstone from Taungurung country in Victoria, Australia, about 35 centimeters across, small enough for one person to lift. On it are 3 sets of footprints, long toes, and at the end of each toe, a claw. Claws matter. The amphibians of this period did not have them. Amniotes did, the group that contains every reptile, every bird, and every mammal, including you. There are no belly drag marks, no tail marks. The animal was carrying its body clear of the ground as it walked. One of the researchers who identified it was the same man who first noticed those marks in the Polish quarry, more than 20 years earlier. The slab is about 355 million years old. That pushes the origin of the amniotes back by at least 35 million years. Put another way, while Tiktaalik was still propping itself up in the shallows, something with claws was already walking on dry ground. Now go back to that footprint. For a long time, Tiktaalik was described as the missing link. The animal caught in the act. It was not. The Polish trackways show that animals with feet were already walking around 10 million years before Tiktaalik lived. That does not make Tiktaalik a mistake, and it does not make the transition doubtful. It makes Tiktaalik a survivor, a member of a lineage that had already been overtaken, still doing perfectly well in shallow water while its relatives were out on the mud. What the footprint really tells us is something less comfortable and far more interesting. The fossil record of this transition is not a sequence. It is a scattering of survivors, and the gaps between them are enormous. And while all of this was happening at the waterline, something much larger was building up behind it. Inland, out of the frame, the plants had finally solved the problem they started with. By 386 million years ago, in what is now an abandoned quarry in Cairo, New York, the ground is covered in roots. Not filaments, roots. Woody, branching, running meters out from a trunk and deep into the ground. They belong to Archaeopteryx, the first thing on this planet you would recognize as a tree. And in the words of the people who found them, they look strikingly modern. Roots do something no earlier plant could do. They break rock apart chemically and physically on a continental scale. But the immediate problem was simpler. What comes out of broken rock is phosphorus. It went into the rivers went into the sea, and the sea bloomed. Algae grew, died, sank, and rotted. Rotting consumes oxygen. Across the shallow shelves of the world, the water below the surface went still and dark and lethal. Around 372 million years ago, more than half the species on this planet died. Life moving onto the land very nearly killed life in the sea. So what actually happened here? There was no conquest, there was no single moment, and no lineage that stepped out of the water and claimed a continent. There was a very long accident. Over tens of millions of years, in 100 separate places, organisms that were already equipped for something else discovered that they could survive a few meters past the waterline. A spore with a wall built to resist drying. A millipede with tubes that only work in air. A fish with a shoulder joint it had grown for pushing through weed. None of them were trying to get onto land. All of them ended up there. And then look at what finally rebuilt this planet. It was not the animals. Nothing that walked or breathed there or hunted along that shoreline changed this world in any way you could measure. It was roots. The land was taken by the one thing that could not move at all, and it cost the ocean half of everything living in it. And the partnership that started all of it never ended. Walk into any forest on Earth. Under the leaf litter, threaded through every root, is a fungal network doing exactly the job it was doing 407 million years ago. As much as 80% of the phosphorus in a living plant still arrives through a fungus. Plants never conquered the land. Fungi did and brought the plants with them. And the deal is still running under every forest you have ever walked through. If this is the kind of thing you want more of, slow, careful, and honest about what we do not know, the like button genuinely helps this channel find people like you. And the question I asked you at the start, plant or something else? If you said plant, you were half right. The plant was there. It just was not the one in charge. Tell me in the comments whether that landed, because those forests were only getting started. As they spread, they buried carbon faster than anything alive could rot it, and the oxygen in the air began to climb. It reached a level it has never reached again, and it produced insects the size of birds. That is where we go next.